right, we're going to start up as we do. Amanda, this is more for your benefit. Just you probably didn't hear this because this morning the author got a hold of me, and I now have, if you want the images that the author uses for the um, Joomla class, they're out there on the system. All right. No, no, we're going to finish the whole book first. So, you what? Oh, okay. You have my sympathies, you really do. All right, so today I'm going to go over the chapter on arrays, but before I do, I want you to realize, now we went through the introduction, we went through the getting started with PHP, we went through variables, we went through forms in PHP, we went through numbers, we went through strings, we went through control structures. All right, and we're going to go through arrays today, which means that what's left is creating web apps, cookies and sessions, functions, files and directories, intro to databases, and putting it all together. So the bottom line is there's like, what, 12 chapters or something like that in this book. I believe that's what it is. And out of those 12 chapters, 13 chapters. After today, we have the first 7 finished. All right. I do want to mention something to you that I did not say earlier, and I got to make sure that it's still here. I believe it is. All right, if you look up here, this is on the P drive for the class. It's under a folder called PDFs. And just a couple of these I wanted to show you real quick. A book that I used to use for this class, it's a little bit dated, but it's a really good book, is called Beginning PHP 5.3 by Matt Doyle. And you can see it's 840 pages. I found a PDF of it under IT Books. So I put that out there. So if you have any interest, sometimes, you know, you go through a book and you're like, it's not the good book or a bad book, but I wish it had more meat in it. So if you want to see stuff, there's a lot of stuff that's covered in here that's not covered in our book. All right. The other thing is there's another document out here that's this one. I found this online. It's again a little bit dated, but it's called PHP Reference, Beginner to Intermediate PHP 5. It's by Mario Lurig. And if you look in here, it's 160 pages. But this literally almost reads in many ways, this is a lot like a guide. It's like going out to the help almost. So if you learn better that way, I'd rather give you a bunch of different ways that you can get your information from. I'd rather give you too much stuff than not enough. So for instance, again, if I go out to control structures, which we covered the other day, all right, there's going to be tons of examples, and it's the way the author shows how to do things. So if that helps you, great. And that'll be out there, and there's more stuff out there. There's some other stuff too. I'm not going to go through that right now. Okay? So, jumping on into the book here and jumping into chapter 7. All right? Using arrays. So that's where we are right now. So I'm going to go through a lot of the examples and stuff that the author has here in this program. And as always, I'm going to take for granted that if something doesn't make sense, you're going to let me know. All right? Again, arrays in PHP are very similar to arrays in JavaScript. Now again, if you haven't had a JavaScript class, that's not going to mean a whole heck of a lot to you. I get that. But the point is, for those of you who have, and that's most of the people in this room, you start to see some of the similarities between the different languages. All right, so it's the last variable type, as the author says, that he's going to talk about in here. So I'm not going to read this to you, but you can see it. What I'm going to concentrate on is first the stuff here. I don't care really about multi-dimensional arrays. They have their place, and I don't mean to say at all that they're never used. But by and large, depending on the application, all right, they're not going to be used as often as a single-dimension array. So we're going to talk about array creation and etc. And then, so I'm going to pretty much skip those few pages, but we'll talk a little bit about sorting and a little bit about transforming. That's the explode and implode that we've talked about. All right. And the other thing that I wanted to show you, this is me. So what I'm about to tell you, I'm going to say I found this interesting, and you might say, well, yeah, you're right, that's you. But the other day I'd shown you this example in class. This is one that I've been working on that I've written. All right, and maybe that's part of the problem. I didn't take it out of a book. I just did it totally by hand, and maybe that's part of the reason I've had problems with it. I don't know. I think that's it here. It's this one. So notice now, if I go in and I click check form, all right, and it tells me all the errors that I found. Not only does it go through the ones that we looked at the other day, but it also goes through the formatting stuff. All right, so that's in there, and I'm going to put that out there under today's. And you got it again both in string format and in array format. The problem is, when I ran this the other day, and you may or may not remember, I even showed it to you, when all I was doing was checking for required fields, if that was it, and I put something in every one of these, all right, that when I clicked check form, it came up with a little table and it showed me what I'd entered in for the record. Now, if I put valid stuff in, it shows me nothing. So I'm going to have to figure out what that problem is, but I haven't yet. All right? So right now, you can see it's got the placeholder text, etc. So it's written, and this, of course, this is just the HTML file, so you can see all the stuff that's in there. And again, if I do go and run it and click check form, it's got this, and all it shows me for the source there is just the same stuff. So it shows me the errors. All right, that's it in a big string over there, and that's it in array format. All right, so I hope to have something for you on that very, very quickly. The idea is, what I want to do is go over chapter 7 today, all right, and start myself working on your first assignment. If I get that done today, I'll put it out on the system. If I don't get it done, it'll be put out on the system by Tuesday. Next week on Tuesday, I want to finish this, so where I told you before, and we are going to do this, that when you have, I'll find it sooner, there it is. When you have this, I want it to, if I click check form, I don't get stuff over here. I don't want that. I want to click check form and have all the errors show up over here. All right. Plus, I've got to make some changes to it that right now, I understand if you click check form, the way I've written this right now, it gives you the required stuff, but then it still goes through and does the other stuff, and they both fail. Does that make sense? But what I want is if you put in a social security number that looks like 111-22-333, and I'm going to leave off the last 3, and I click check form, you can see it doesn't give me the error under the required, but it still gives me that one. So I want only one or the other error to appear. I want them to appear right here, and I want them to be in red. That's where we're moving to next week. All right? So if we can get through that by Tuesday of next week, fine. I'll give you the code. Not a problem. All right? Then I will have an assignment for you by then, and I'm going to say, here, it's probably going to be 4 programs. One of them will be creating something that looks similar to this and doing a few other things with it. The other 3 will be just straight PHP programs. None of them will be exceedingly long. All right, you've got this one to use as a template, and there's plenty of programs that are in the book. I'll try to base them off stuff that's in the book. They won't be identical, but I'll try to base them off stuff that's in the book, especially for those of you who have little programming experience, so you've got something that you can look back at. All right, so with that said then, we jump back in here and jump into talking about arrays. All right. All right. So here's how the author goes in and talks about an array. Again, I don't want to read to you, but the idea is everything that we've looked at thus far as a string or a number or a Boolean, which are really pretty much the only data types we've discussed thus far, those 3 data types are described as, or also known as, scalar data types, and the author talks about it right there. They can only hold a single value at a time. So when I'm sitting here and I'm writing my, $age, I can say $age equal 21. And later on in my program, I can say $age equal 22. The person had, or 33. The person had a birthday. That's totally legit. But I can't, these variables can only hold a value at a time. They're scalar. All right, they're also known as elementary data items. An array is an example of a data structure. All right, so the author defines an array here of numbers and or strings and or other arrays. Basically, it can hold anything that allows one variable to hold more than one thing. So the author uses this as an example, and it's actually not a bad example. So if I come through here and do this, right? If I do this, I now have 3 different variables. You all get that. I understand that. But I can come in here and I can say, for example, $items equals array, and then I can come in and individually, if I want to, I can say $items bracket bracket equals, and just put them in there like we have, apples, bananas, and oranges rather. So the difference is now I've got one variable that's got 3 different values. Here I've got 3 different variables. That's the main difference between an elementary data item and a scalar data item. All right. Now it is possible too. When I set up the array, I could have just done this. I could have said equals array, and then I could have said apples, bananas, oranges. That's fine too. Now the only time I'm going to do something like this, and actually when I set up the arrays, let me just hit enter a few times. The only time I'm going to do this is if I don't have a lot of values that I'm going to put into the array. I mean, even, months of the year, whatever, that isn't real bad, but it's kind of a pain. And there's a faster way to do some of that stuff that we're going to look at in just a bit. But again, what I want you to understand is that's 3 variables. That's one variable with 3 values. All right, that's the big difference. And again, some of you have heard this already, maybe all of you have heard this already, but like JavaScript, I can do this. And so I can have non-like values in there. So I'm combining in the same array strings, numeric values, and booleans. That's totally legit to do that. You can do that in JavaScript. You can't do that in most other programming languages. All right, so you've got a lot of versatility that you can use with arrays. And that's what the author talks about here. Says if you do this, you're going to have 3 variables with those values. However, if you set it up like this, well, it'll be in here someplace. It's 1 variable. All right? And the thing to realize that the stuff that we've looked at some of this stuff in here that I'm about to highlight a little bit, but not in a lot of depth. But every one of those, the author says super globals, but $_server, $_get, $_post, $_cookie, $_session, $_env. They're all super globals, but what that means is each one of them is a super global array. So it can hold all sorts of different stuff. Numeric values, non-numeric values, string values, non-string values, Boolean values, non-Booleans, other arrays, all sorts of stuff. All right? And they're called super global because all that stuff in there is automatically available to you in any program. Excuse me. Now, they go into talking about arrays, and they say that when you are naming an array, you use the same conventions you use when you name a variable. Those 3, excuse me, I've got hiccups. The same 3 rules that you see right here. Array names must begin with a $sign. They can have letters, $signs, or letters, underscores, or numbers afterwards, and they can have any combination of those 3. All right? So again, notice, in fact, I guess that when I showed you this, when I do it, yeah, I did do it right. So the way that I'm showing it to you right there is the same way the author showed it to you in the book right here. But he called it list, I called it items, but it's no difference. All right. Now, I said this to you the other day. I'm saying it to you again. I want to make sure you all see this, and I want to make sure I use the right syntax. All right, so I'm going to say this. $states equals array, and all I'm going to put in here is just 2 states. Wisconsin, Illinois. All right. If I do that, then right now, $states has this in there. So right now, doing it that way, $states holds this. So $states 0 is equal to Wisconsin, and $states 1 is equal to Illinois. And I believe, at least my hope is, everybody in here, that makes sense to you. Now, the thing is, what this is this is what's referred to as a numerically indexed array. But like JavaScript, one of the things that PHP allows you to do is to create an associative array. So instead of setting it up like this, which is fine to do, there's not a problem with doing it, but instead of doing this, I can also do it like this, where I come in here, let me hit enter a few times and move that up, where I can come in here and do this. I can say array, then I can say this. And I'll put them on separate lines just so they're easier to read. All right, the difference between those two is that now, the way that these are set up, all right, now instead of having it look like this, the way I would refer to these as states WI and states IL. So rather than being numerically accessed, we're accessing them through strings. Okay? So all that stuff is legal. Now, if I do this, if I create an array, I'm just going to tell you how the way that sometimes people use this. To me, it's kind of overkill. I don't see the reason for doing it, but as Caleb would say, one of my first-year students in the first-year class, you do it because you can. I don't know. But if I came through here and said this, $months, let's just say I'm going to create a months array, so I'm going to say equals array, and I'm just going to literally put in there. All right, I'm going to put in January. I'll put in just January and February, just so you see this. So I put in here January, February. Well, the problem, it's not really a problem, but the problem, so to speak, with this is now it's $months, all right, 0 equals January, and it's $months 1 equals February. That's what we actually have now with these. All right, and again, is that a bad thing? Not at all. But to some people, that's confusing, to put 0 in for January, etc. So one way of getting around that is you put in an empty month for the first month. So now there's nothing in 0, all right? So 0 literally equals nothing, 1 equals January, and 2 equals February. Well, that makes a lot more sense. But another way sometimes people get around this is they just do this. They come through there and so I'm going to grab the same thing that we've got right here, just move it up again a little bit. And they say array like this, but then they do this. And you can just keep going. You don't even have to put the 2 there. Now what we have is this. See the difference? Now you're not wasting anything. It's not really a big thing one way or the other. All right? But the author talks about this in the chapter, so I just went over it just for completeness. All right? All right. The example that he has in here is a little bit bizarre. It's like a restaurant, and they have different soups on different days of the week. So Monday, you can see the specials, clam chowder. Tuesday, it's white chicken chili. Wednesday, it's vegetarian, etc. So if you put this in, like they show you right here in lines 15, 16, and 17, if you put that in like that, without the line numbers, of course, and then you tell it to print, all right, if I were to just say print $soups, it's going to print garbage. It's going to print the word array. But if I tell it to print R, if I tell it to do that, it's going to print something that's going to look almost exactly like this. So when you want to print arrays or anything that's not a simple data type, you use print R. Okay? That's what you get. There's the print R output right there on page, whatever page that is. I don't know. 156. All right? Now, a couple things. And this is new to everybody in this room. So Hopefully you've at least been listening with one ear, even if you're doing something else, but I'd like everybody to at least hear this. All right? Not that you have to look up here or anything, but at least this is important enough stuff in the book that I want you to hear this, because what I'm about to tell you right now does not exist in JavaScript, to my knowledge. So notice what you can do. I can come up here and do this, either one of these two things. When I create an array, I can give it a range. So that'll automatically create an array, and that array will have in it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's kind of nice, because if I was going to create an array with 100 numbers, I could just say 1, 100. All right? And you can do the same thing alphabetically as they show right there. All right? It's a built-in PHP function that's called range. And as always, and I think I showed you this before, I'm pretty sure I did, but just in case, if I go out to php.net, in fact, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to say PHP arrays. And I'm going to find the one under .NET. There it is. There's arrays under php.net manual en language.types.array.php. And these are the different array functions. All right, well, they're in there someplace. I guess it's not right on this spot. But there's about 40, 50, I don't remember what it is. It's PHP array functions. Still says it's here. There they are. All right, so that's all the different stuff that you can do with arrays. Again, I don't know how many of them there are. My guess is 30, 40, whatever it seems like it is. I don't really care. All right. Notice too that when you set up a range like that, notice this one. What does that say? That says start with 0, go all the way to 100, and go by 2s. So again, what'll be in there? 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. All right. It'll do the same thing. It'll just skip the 101. No. All right. Couple things. Once you've got an array, this is the easiest way to add elements. So arrays dynamically expand and contract. In other languages, when you create an array, you've got to give it a size, and that size can change. PHP, like JavaScript, you don't have to do that. All right? And so again, going back to the example that I just showed you a couple minutes ago, all right, if I decide I want to put another month in there, now I can just come in and say $months, bracket, bracket, equal March. All right? And if I do that, it's as though I added March here at the beginning. So again, I can make it, and if I decide, geez, I don't remember what comes next, but I know that the 12th month, I know for sure that the 12th month is December, because that's the month Christmas is in. So what that does is, right there, if I did that, that does the equivalent of this. So imagine that that stuff, all the stuff that you see in there, that's as though I typed in 1 January, February, March, which we just added, and then April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and then it put in December. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So it'll fill in the other ones, locations 3 through 11, but it'll just fill them in with the empty string. Now notice how you remove things from an array. This is really important that you look at this, because we're going to be using unset for a few different things. All right? So if you say unset followed by array followed by the name of the array like this, that basically gets rid of the whole variable. I don't think it even exists anymore after it's been unset. But if you say unset followed by the name of the array followed by an element, it only removes that element. So if I were to come back in here and say unset from $months, and I'll make sure I'm giving you the right syntax. Okay, that's what I thought. 2, for example. Now that array would look like, that would be the same as if I did this. It'll totally remove the value that was in there. All right? So there's a lot of different things and ways and ways to play around with this stuff. You will get a program that has arrays in it. It won't be a real difficult program, but you'll get a program. All right? We removed 2, but remember we said the first one was 1. So this automatically, February is 2 and March is 3. Am I answering the question you're asking? Here. Oh, no. What I said later is this is a way that we could add this. And if we added that line, it was as though we had March in there. Yes. Yes. So if you put in just open and closed, it just appends it right onto the end. All right? Did that answer your question? Okay. Notice this. Here's another way that you can do it too. Because the author talks here, if you look at line 22, which is about to be in blue, arrays in Java don't have, arrays in PHP don't have a length function. They have a count method that you use instead. And that tells you how many elements are in there. So notice it will tell you how many soups you have in there. And originally you have what? 1, 2, 3. So this will say the soups array originally had 3 elements. Remember, they're using double quotes here, so it'll do interpolation, and it'll print the value of the variable instead of the variable itself. Then they come in and add 3 more. Then they do count again, and they say after adding 3 more soups, the array now has 6 elements. All right? There's nothing wrong with his example. It's just, to me, it was a little bizarre to use something like this. I think you could have come up with a lot better examples of arrays. And if I said that, I'm sure that Ullman would look me in the eye and say, fine, when you write your book, then do that. All right? Now, a couple things that you can do with arrays. Take a look at this, if you would. Everybody, just look at what's on the screen here. All right? So what we have here is we had that original array that you saw up above. This thing right here. There. This is our original array called soups. And it's got clam chowder, white chicken chili, and vegetarian. All right? Then what they do is they take that original array and they run what's called the merge command on it. So they're creating a new array which says glue together what's in array 1 with array 2. So now that array will have in it just what you saw. It'll have Monday clam chowder, Tuesday white chicken chili, Wednesday vegetarian. Then after that it will have Thursday chicken noodle, Friday tomato, Saturday cream of broccoli. So if you want to be able to merge 2 arrays together, that's a way you can do it. That's doing it and creating it as a new array. If I had said here, $array 1 equals array merge, array 1 and array 2, it would have put everything into array 1. Does that make sense? But the original values that are in there, you know, you wouldn't have just the original. You have the original plus the ones you added. And again, I go back to what I just mentioned to you, and that is, if you look, if that confused you, just go down here and find array merge. All right? Because there's the syntax. There's an example. And they have really good examples in here, and quite often they'll have 4, 5, 10 examples. All right? So if you found any of that confusing, that's an easy way to get the information. All right? All right. Again, if you use a numeric array, as it says, the first item will be array 0. So in much the same way with what we just looked at here, with this, we would say something like echo the first month is, all right, $months sub-0. And that would say the first month is January. Exactly what you'd think. Down here, if I wanted the first state, I'd say echo, let's put it in double quotes, the first state is, but now I can't say $state sub-0. I cannot do this. That doesn't make any sense to the system. So I'd have to say that. All right. Now I'm going to tell you something, and as soon as I tell you this, please do me one favor. Forget I ever told you. Okay, I'm serious. Forget I ever told you this. And that is, I don't know why you'd ever want to do this. Okay? But you can do this. So the first two elements are part of an associative array, and the third element is now numerically accessed. So this would be states sub WI. This would be states sub IL. Then this one, Michigan, now would be states sub 2. That's legal to combine the syntax for both an associative array and a non-associative array together. I've never seen it done. I can't think for the life of me offhand think of what reason you'd want to do that. You can raise your hand and say, oh, I got one. I don't care. There's just one of those things you can do, but I just off the top of my head at least, I can't think of a reason to do that you could tell me that would make a lot of sense. Especially when you can fake it by doing something like I showed you in here. I don't know why you'd want to do that. I really and truly don't. All right? Again, you might be able to come up with a reason. Okay, more power to you. But to me, it just is kind of silly that they even let you do it, but they let you do it. All right. Accessing array elements. I'm up to page 161. Like I said, we'll be done by break time, and then the rest of the period is yours. All right. Now, notice on this page, this right here. I'm going to highlight this. Yeah. Eventually, I'll bring up the right one of these. And go through a couple more examples. Okay. I'm going to hit enter a few times to bring that back up so I'm at the top. All right. You see this. Okay. What you see right here is if I want to print out an associative array. Okay? So what this is going to do right here with this code that you see right here, looking at that states array that we just did a couple minutes ago. So let me grab that states array, and let's just we'll put Michigan in here, but we'll put it in the quote right way, unquote. All right, so I'm going to put it in like this. Again, you can have spaces in here, you don't have to, but I'm going to grab this back. And I'm going to paste it down here. So I'm supposing that when we do this, we've set up the array like this. Everybody cool with that? Everybody understand what I put in here? This, by putting this in right here, this is going to print out the following. Key is WI, value is Wisconsin. Key is IL, value is Illinois. Key is MI, value is Michigan. That's the most I've typed without making a mistake, other than that one I didn't make it capitalized in a long time. But you understand? So the key, that's how you refer to it. All right? And there's the array, so really it wouldn't be for each. It wouldn't be, it's not dollar array, it'd be dollar states. What punctuation? Oh, not this. They put a period here. They didn't put one here. So it wouldn't have anything at the end, but it would have the first one. Like that. Okay? But I want you to realize these are key value pairs. In associative array, this idea was ripped off right from Perl. And that's how Perl does a lot of things when they create arrays. They create them typically as an associative array. With a key, which are these things, and the value, which are these things. The for each is just another way of doing a for loop. All right? I could have also written this as a for loop, but the for each works very nicely. If all I care about is the value, I don't even need to list all this. I can just say as $value and then just print out the value. But you oftentimes see for eaches like this because you want to be able to reference both the key and the associated value. All right, and that's what they show in here. I'm sure the author explains it better than I just did. Okay. There's his for each. Okay, and hopefully, does he show the output? There you go. So he's formatted it a little bit. That's kind of thing you might put on a restaurant sign or in a menu or whatever. Okay. All right. All right, so this is what I meant to show you before. So if you look, here they've done it, dollar array is value, and then they're redoing it as a for loop. You notice that it's a little crisper to do it as a for each, all right? And that's the way it's usually done. But if you don't do it that way, it's not going to hurt anything. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it that way, in other words, all right? So the next section, the next few pages are on multidimensional arrays, all right? I used to do this where I would, this was before your time, John, but your time here at least, that what I would do is I would have students in almost every language they took with me program a tic-tac-toe game. Does that sound, I'm asking you, does that sound like it'd be easy or hard? It's hard. Okay, it is. Java, whatever. It's not that the doing it is hard, it's a lot of code. All right? But multi-dimensional arrays would be one place where you could do a tic-tac-toe board, because what's a multi-dimensional array? A two-dimensional array, you've all seen spreadsheets. That's a two-dimensional array. All right? And you can have arrays in this language like you can in JavaScript with as many dimensions as you want to. All right? So he mentions here that we've got 3 arrays. We've got one called fruits, one called meats, one called groceries. And if he wanted to combine them all into one and basically have like a pecking order, he'd be able to do that. But the one that he uses is he uses his own books. This guy, I'd like to meet him sometime. He seems like, I bet he'd be a terrific person. But I've never seen a guy who can put in examples of where he hawks his own stuff as much as this guy does. All right? So he does it where he's got his books, and he uses multi-dimension arrays with his books. All right? It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it ends up looking really ugly with some of the work that you end up doing. You'll have an array inside of an array, literally, when you work with multi-dimension arrays. It's what it is. Some books call it an array of arrays. Okay. That was enough of that. All right. Some of the cool things that you can do with this language, again, just so you see this stuff. So what page am I on? I don't know. I guess page 168. All right. But one of the things that you're able to do is notice that with arrays, they've got a lot of cool ways that you can sort. Please look at the chart that's up on your screen right now. It's really important that you at least see the stuff that's in this chart. Because you'll notice there are different ways that you can sort arrays. Notice that if you use sort or rsort, it takes your array, and if it's an associative array, it doesn't sort the keys. So in other words, if I had done the sort, a regular sort on this is why it's important. Now it's going to have WI, Illinois, LIL, Michigan, and MI, Wisconsin. Because the values will be sorted, but the keys don't change. Do you understand that? Because that's a problem a lot of people make, is they work with associative arrays, all right, and they run a regular sort. If you want the keys to sort also, notice instead of sort, it's a sort, and instead of rsort, it's AR sort. All right, that's for the values. But notice it does maintain the keys. But that's sorting by values. If I want to sort by the keys, then it's K. I don't know what the A is supposed to stand for. It's not values. They didn't make it V sort and VR sort, but then K for key. All right. I may ask you to do sorting. I don't know. All right. Literally, a lot of times when I do this, I sit down at the kitchen table and I start writing code. And it's like, and I get halfway through it and I go, that really sucks. I wouldn't want to do that. So I start it all over again. That's how I do a lot of assignments. Sometimes I'll go and I'll look in a book from another language and I'll go, oh, that'd be kind of cool. I wonder what that would look like in PHP. So I write it in PHP, and if it looks like I think they could do that, that's how you get your assignments. All right. So they give some examples in here of sorting, and he shows it, okay? So he shows different ways of sorting by the keys and sorting by the values. And if you look right here, you'll notice here's the original array, Richard, Sherwood, etc. There's no rhyme or reason to it. All right. Then when he uses a value sort, it's done, notice here, but notice since he used the A sort, it also keeps it because it's Tony who got the 98. Richard got a 95, right? If we just did a regular sort on here, it would have Richard 98. So these keys would not change. Sherwood would be happy because he'd go from an 82 to a 95. All right, so the idea is if you want to keep both, if you want to sort both the value and the key, all right, you use AR sort if you want to sort that by value, and you use KR sort if you want to do it by key. And notice this is in alphabetic order. That's in grade order. All right, so it's how do I want to do it? If I was putting it into my grade book, that'd probably be done by last name type of thing. All right, does that all make sense? Most of the stuff again in here, I think at least, is pretty straightforward. Next in the book, turning up to page 172, they talk about transforming between strings and arrays. And again, we've talked a little bit about this before, but I'm going to say it again because this is explode and it's implode. All right? And notice the difference. It says you can turn a string into an array, or you can turn an array into a string. All right? So if you want to, the first, as it says, turns an array into a string. All right, so an array into a string is implode, I-A-S, implode array to string. All right? If you want to go from a string to an array, it's explode, so E-S-A. Don't ask me how I remember that. I write it down. But I kind of look at it this way. All right, if I want to turn a string into an array, explode says I'm taking one thing, and when I'm exploding it, I'm breaking it into a bunch, right? Because when something explodes, isn't that what happens? Stuff flies all over the place. But when you implode, you're going from the outside in. So you're going from an array to one string. That's how I remember it. I don't know if that helps or doesn't help. But you end up using explode and implode a lot in code. And one of the reasons that you do that is what I've already shown you. If I had a string and the string was broken up, let's say that I had a string, but it was broken up, it had natural delimiters, blank spaces or commas or something else, then what I could do if I wanted to is I could come through here, and where we've got the different functions, all right, I could find, I think it's just in here under the E's, is it? All right, fine, make me a liar. Is it array explode? It's in here someplace. All right. There should be an array in front of it, though. All right, there we go, explode. So why would I do that? All right, that's splitting a string by a string. Okay, so what's the, so if I explode, I'm turning a string into an array. Why would I do that? I would do that, I might do that, so that I'm able to use all those string functions that I showed you the other day on that. Why would I go the other way and go from a string into from an array to a string? All right, which is imploding. So I could use the string functions on it. Because sometimes there's a function that exists for an array function that there's no counterpart in a string. Or sometimes there's a string function where there's no counterpart in an array. So you might transform one to the other just for that reason. And if you say all you did was just really confuse the hell out of me, then you probably aren't going to do it anyway. Yes? Yeah, that's a way you could do it, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of different uses for this. There really and truly are. I'm not giving a bunch of great examples, but there are. All right. And then finally, the author talks about it here, turning up all the way to page 176, creating an array from a form. All right. The author says here, throughout the chapter, you've established arrays entirely from within a PHP page. You can, however, send an array of data to a script via an HTML form. In fact, that's what Post does. All right? You saw this before. I don't want to, bore you too much with this stuff. But again, of course it wouldn't be there. Oh, it's because it's over here. In this example that we have right here, if we look at this and I go and I view the page source, let's see, no, I don't want the page image source. I want the actual code. All right. Again, this shouldn't be a surprise. What is that? That's all the stuff that exists in the $_post array. Right? That's all it is. I'm just grabbing stuff that's in that array. And where was that array from? You know that too. I grabbed all that stuff because that was all the stuff that existed inside of here. That's all that stuff. All right. So all the author is basically saying in here is, again, totally legit to send an array of data to a PHP script via HTML, and he says, in fact, that's what we've been doing. All right. Now, this is a suggestion, but it's one I think you should listen to, and that is, I would read this little section in here, because the most problematic thing in working with this stuff is working with checkboxes and radio buttons. And you have to remember, we looked at this the other day, especially radio buttons, all right, when you start to work with a group of things. Again, such as what I just showed you in here. Those are, that's a drop down, but someplace in here I don't remember, but I had radio buttons, or maybe that was for the first year people, it doesn't matter. But the point is, when you're doing this stuff, it's a little bit more problematic. There's a little bit more work to it. I'm going to have you create an HTML form that's very similar to the one that I showed you here. All right? It'll look a little bit different. Then I'm going to say, now put your own CSS in it, make it look whatever way you want. All right? But I'm going to make sure it has radio buttons in it and it has checkboxes in it. And I'm going to make sure that when you print out the information, that you also print out the value of the radio button that was selected, and I want you to print out the value of the checkbox or checkboxes that were selected. Does that make sense? He explains in here much better than I could how to do that. The point is, when you start to do this and you create a group, all the groups are going to have the same name. What's going to be different is going to be the value. Weird example, because I don't look at ham as being a topping for anything. All right? Maybe something else that you'd put on a sandwich, I don't know. But it just sounds a little weird to me. And as it says, the problem in this particular case is that each form element must have a unique name. If you have several checkboxes, each with a name of topping, only the value of the last one is going to be received. If you were to create unique names for each one, that would be tedious. And sometimes it wouldn't even make a lot of sense. So the way around that is to use array syntax. He gives you an example here. These would be your pizza. Okay, that makes more sense. Pizza toppings. Okay, that makes more sense. All right. So he shows you how you can do that in here. And you'll notice, look at the name on each one of these that's in gray here. This is on page 177 in the book. Each one is the name of an array. That way you can cycle through the array. We've already looked in this lecture on 2 ways you can cycle through the array, with a for loop and a for each loop. Well, if I set it up like this, I want to make sure you cycle through that array. Why? Because if my toppings, for example, not this example here, but if it's a pizza example and my toppings are every topping, I want all of them. I don't want just the last one that's in there. All right. So he shows you how you can do that. This is a great example, and I don't probably give it its due. All right. But what he shows you in here is when you go through and you do all this, all right, then notice the code here. This is the next example. It's on 179. Because what it says there is go through and, in this example here with checkboxes, go through and each time look through and print out all the ones that are checked. You could write the same kind of thing for a radio button, just so you know. It would only print one for a radio button, because if they were in a group, only one radio button can be selected. All right. But for instance, if I were to say to you, what's your favorite color? and I said choose one, and I gave you 5 colors, I choose a radio button. All right? And I'd say, what's your favorite class at BTC? All right? Well, you might say, geez, all the ones that Jeff teaches. I don't really know. So I'd make that a checkbox so you could choose multiple ones. All right? And I believe everybody understands the difference between the two. Okay? Last thing that's in the chapter, very last thing. This is on page 180 of the book. This is kind of, again, of an important topic. All right? Here's a quick quiz for you from yesterday in the C class. How many things can you return from a function? How many values? 1. But what you can do in PHP is you can create this list function. And if I want to return a whole bunch of stuff, all right, boom, I want to return a whole bunch of stuff. So what do? I put it into an array, all right, and then when I return the array, but then when I want to break it up into individual values, gee, that would be kind of like taking an array and breaking it up into a string. All right, so I can do this. You literally could do something like this with any kind of programming language. You could do this in Java, but it would be a lot more work. There is a function that's built specifically for this. As it says, it's used to assign array elements to individual variables. All right? So they've done that here. Okay? And it says, but you can use empty values and ignore these. So there's different ways that you can do it. And then he talks a little bit in here about how you could do that and why you might want to do that. All right? So there's a lot of really good nuggets, so to speak, in this book. I wish I was doing a better job than I'm probably doing of going over all of them, but we're trying to hit at least the high points. So again, that's all I'm lecturing for today. The rest of the period's yours. On Tuesday of next week, we're going to go through, like I said, trying to fix the example that my own example that I managed to butcher. If we get all that done, I'm just going to give you the code. If we get all that done, I'm going to show you it both as separate files and as one file. If we get all that done on Tuesday, that would be great. And if we don't, that's also fine. But by Tuesday, when you come in here, I'll have your first assignment. It won't be officially assigned till Thursday because that'll be a lab day. That's the plan, at least. When will it be due? That'll be 4 weeks from that Thursday. So the other two are due the 2nd or something like that, October 2nd. This will be the 9th then. So you'll have some time. My hope is, though, that by giving you more time like this, you've got more time to spend. Oh, I'll spend an hour on PHP right now. And I'll spend an hour on whatever right now. Not that, okay, it's due tomorrow, I better spend 24 hours on this. I really and truly hope you're not doing that. All right? Or if you are, that you lie to me and say that you're not doing that. How's that? All right, so that's all that I had. Questions on anything in the chapter? Anything we've gone over on the first 7 chapters? All right? Otherwise, there's not a homework assignment, but if there would be, it would be to look through these first 7 chapters, about the first 182 pages, just kind of quickly whiz through them and say, do I have any questions? Is there anything that's in here that the author mentioned that Jeff didn't mention, or he said it differently, or maybe Jeff made a mistake? All right? That's all that I had.